November the 19th, 1863, the National Cemetery of Gettysburg Battlefield was dedicated. Three famous American poets of the day, Whittier, Longfellow, and Bryant, had all refused to be part of the ceremony. So the committee got a man by the name of Edward Everett. Edward Everett had been an editor, newspaper editor. He had been our ambassador. He had been president of Harvard University, and he had been Secretary of State. And he was a great orator. Now, he spoke for 2.5 hours. How anyone in today's world, we wouldn't think of it. How could you sit and listen or stand and listen to someone speak for 2.5 hours? But indeed, he did. Lincoln was asked only as a courtesy, and he was to give, quote, a few appropriate remarks. Lincoln welcomed the idea because for a long time he had thought about giving what we would call today a mission statement, an explanation of what the nation was trying to do in this war. He prepared the speech meticulously. Weeks before he made the delivery, he had finished it. He had read it aloud to his friends, he had rehearsed it, and it's a marvelous speech. Consider this: without mentioning slavery, states' rights, or nullification or other alleged causes of the Civil War, he linked the birth of the United States of America to the Declaration of Independence. Remember, he says 7 years ago. That goes back to 1776. He said, let's talk about the real birth of America, the Declaration of Independence, which said all men are created equal, rather than to the Constitution of 1783 with its implicit recognition of slavery, tacit. We won't talk about that. We won't talk about the fact that slavery still exists in 1783. It's a brief, simple speech, and Lincoln made it clear once and for all that America was not a union, it was one nation, not merely a collection of separate sovereign states. It was a gem. He spoke for less than 3 minutes. His work further elevated the importance of the Battle of Gettysburg. But oddly enough, Lincoln's speech was not considered by everyone to be as profound then as it is today. The immediate reaction of the crowd left even Lincoln with the impression that it had been a failure. There was no applause at the end of his talk. He talks for less than 3 minutes, he sits down, no applause. He turned to his friend Ward Lamon right after the speech, and he said, it's a flat failure, and the people are disappointed. That's how he felt about it. Many newspaper reporters in attendance at Lincoln's address actually panned the speech. A Harrisburg newspaper editorial said, quote, we pass over the silly remarks of the president for the credit of the nation. We are willing that the veil of oblivion shall be drawn over them, that they shall no more be repeated or thought of. I bet that guy would like to have that editorial back. Same day, the Chicago Times opined that, quote, the cheeks of every American must tingle with shame as he reads those silly, flat, and dishwatery utterances. And the correspondent for the London Times complained somewhat, I think, peevishly. He said, anyone more dull and commonplace, it would not be easy to produce. This about the Gettysburg Address. Well, of course, today's Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is revered as one of the greatest public speeches ever delivered. It has its own monument in the National Cemetery at Gettysburg. But that is not really remarkable because the battlefield has become the world's largest collection of outdoor sculpture. There are more than 1,300 statues, bronze, stone, granite, partly because in the late 19th century, an awful lot of veterans had their own secret agenda. They wanted to make the world know that their regiment or their brigade was the greatest heroes here. But there is an awful lot of statuary at Gettysburg. One last thing about Lincoln's genius for speech writing. He was getting better and better at it every year. If you see his speeches going back to the House Divided speech before he was president, each speech improves. His ability to encompass great ideas into taut prose sentences was improving each year he was in the White House. His last speech, the second inaugural address, March 4th of 1865, was perhaps his best. It's not very well known, but it's a marvelous speech. It is to refute the warmongers in the North, those avengers those hotheads are going to go down and hang every rib from a sour apple tree. He said, no, no. He says in this marvelous speech, inaugural of 1865, he said, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us the light to see the right, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, and for his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and among nations. It's a remarkable talk, isn't it? A remarkable speech. And by the way, no, he didn't write that on the back of an envelope either.